Prudent Scholars in association with Goa Headmasters Association.
Hello and welcome to my class. Wishing you all a very pleasant day. Well students, in the last class, I had already begun the first part of the topic, the age of industrialization, chapter 2 of the history textbook. I now continue with the second part of the lesson. You remember we had stopped with the positive effects of the Industrial Revolution. Just to brush up with the positive effects of the Industrial Revolution. Well, you know, Industrial Revolution came as a big boon, a big blessing to England and to all the other countries of the world. It started in England. It was called the mother of inventions, all right. So, with the industries, with the growth of factories, a lot of positive changes took place in the society. As in from a small scale production of goods, now the goods were produced to a large scale. From the less quantity of goods that were produced, the number of goods increased tremendously and the sale of goods increased, the profits doubled, as a result of which England made a lot of money. All the money that they accumulated of the profits, they invested in setting up new industries and factories. So students, I suppose positive effects is well understood. We move on to the next part of the lesson, the negative effects of the Industrial Revolution. Alright, we now begin with the negative effects. Now, the negative effects was one of the direct effects of the Industrial Revolution. The factory system led to the concentration of wealth in a very few hands. We had two classes in the society, capitalists and the laborers. Now, who do you think took the maximum amount of wealth? Well, students, all the wealth was accumulated in the hands of the capitalist and the laborers were the ones who were at the receiving end, which means they did not make any profits. All the profits, the bigger chunk was taken over by the capitalist. And you see, the capitalists gave rise to a number of social, economic and political problems. Men, women and children, now here, all of them were compelled to go to work. Everybody went and took up jobs in the factories, alright. The men started first, followed after them were the women and of course even children joined the factories. So most of them were actually compelled to go to work because of poverty. They were living in very bad, poor conditions. Now, when they came to the factories, you see, all these people had to work in unhygienic conditions. The conditions in the factories at their workplaces was so bad that it was literally impossible for them to work there. And many of them spent a lot of time working. It was sometimes even 14 hours. There were no breaks given to them, even if there were shifts, alright. So, the lives of the laborers, the workers who worked in these factories was very miserable. They also had to work for very long hours. But these workers, you see, they were all totally at the mercy of the factory owners. Somehow they required jobs, they wanted to work. So even if they were given a very low, if they were given low wages, they were ready to come and work in the factories. Because even that little amount of money that they got was sufficient. No doubt it was very small amount, but they were ready to work. So all these were the negative effects of the Industrial Revolution on the workers. And sometimes these workers, you see, they had even no guarantee of jobs. If they were called today, they didn't have guarantee that tomorrow they would be called again or made to work there, alright. So their life was very insecure. The low wages even compelled children, women to seek employment. So Industrial Revolution for some people, they might consider it not only as a blessing, but it came also as a curse. Now, why do I say curse? Because laborers were misused by the factory owners. They were made to do all sort of work, paying them very little amount of money. Imagine if we were in that particular situation, what would have been our lives like? Alright, and worst was they were not given proper housing condition, they sometimes did not have proper meals, they did not have proper even clothing, you know, their lives were very bad. So all this resulted in a lot of harassment of the workers and their lives became very miserable. And to make the matter much worse, the lives of the workers who worked in mines was much worse than the factory workers. They had to go down, and when they went deep down into the mines, their lives were very risky. They did not know even whether they would come back alive or whether they would be dead. The mine workers preferred to employ women and small children. Now let us find out why small children were made to work in the mines. Being very small, it was easy for the mine workers to place the children down the mines, and as a result of which the work went on faster. Now there was something called child labor. Child labor is one of the most heated topic in our country as well. What is child labor? It basically means children who are made to work below the age of 15. That is the time a child needs to enjoy his or her childhood. They go to school, they go around and play. But during the Industrial Revolution, you see how children were made to struggle, they were made to work. And why was all this done? This was because of poverty. Little children were made to handle small machine, and these children were made to work in these factories, alright, because it was believed that the small hands were easy to handle the machine. Sometimes even their hair was caught inside the machine. Sometimes their hands were cut, legs were cut. Sometimes they became blind. So children faced a lot of risk in the factories and their lives became very tragic. A lot of times they even inhaled toxic gases because these factories they emitted a lot of poisonous chemicals which in turn were inhaled by little children, and many of them would die due to consumption of those toxic gases. Many of them faced breathing problems as well. While thousands of children worked in the factories, there were many of them who also worked in the mines. They were even made to work in the cotton mills. The mills owners, they took orphans. Why did they prefer to work with orphans? Because these orphans, first of all, they were paid very less amount of money. Sometimes what the mill workers would do, they would take them even to their houses which were attached to the factories, which are very close there. They made them even work in the houses, and that too again they were not paid much. So you see, children, when it was time for them to enjoy their childhood, they were basically made to work. Their lives were a struggle. And it was really sad to see how these children did not even enjoy a little of their childhood. Even Sundays, many of the times we say, oh, Sunday is a day for us to play. But on Sundays, children were not allowed to play, they were not allowed to enjoy their leisure time. In fact, they were made to come to the factories or to the workplaces and put in more hours of work, because all that the factory owners believed were to increase their profits. They did not want anything else. They did not care about the children. They did not care about men and women. Their ultimate motive was to increase their profits and of course to make huge amount of money at the cost of the little children and the workers. Children were often sent to the, I have already discussed this point with you, they were sent to the mines. Why were they sent to the mines? Because they were very little, it was easy to push them down there, and of course they could be easily sent down. They also worked in the brick factories. They were considered as unskilled workers. Now students, please keep in mind there is a difference between skilled workers and unskilled workers. What is the meaning of skilled workers? Skilled workers are professionals who are paid more money. Who are unskilled workers? They are the ones who are not having a particular degree, or they are not highly educated, they are not skilled in that particular activity that they undertake, as a result of which less money is given to them. So most of the people who worked in the factories were unskilled workers. So the factory owners took advantage of this situation and paid them less amount of money. So all this was an advantage to the factory owners. Let us take the next topic, colonization of Asia and Africa. Though the Industrial Revolution had increased the wealth and the prosperity of the European countries, it adversely affected the colonies. Now, I am talking about colonies in Asia and Africa. The European nations took utmost advantage of its colonies. Now, we have discussed this point earlier as well. Now, what did the Europeans do? When they had their colonies in Asia and Africa, they made sure that they used the labor, especially in Africa. They were treated like slaves and they were made to work in the European nations. And these slaves were treated so badly that they were not respected, they were not even paid proper salaries, they lived in very bad conditions. So you see how the lives of the slaves in Africa who were brought to make in the European countries was very miserable. And the same happened to the people from Asia. Now these people also worked for the European nations. Again, they worked for a very low price. The commodities that the Europeans bought from the Asian people, that is the Indians, they bought it for a considerable low price. And when they went to their country, the finished product was sold for an exorbitant price, for a very high price. So you have seen the difference, how they bought the product for a cheap price and sold it for a higher price. So all this led to a lot of misery in Asia and Africa. Then this not only led to economic exploitation, but a large number of factories, alright, of the Indian farmers had to be closed down. Especially let's talk about the handicraft factories. Now these had to be closed down because they did not have any business, they did not have any demand. The demand was only for the British goods. And many of the artisans and craftsmen became unemployed and they had to close down their industries. Many were compelled to take back agricultural activities. Now going back to agriculture was again a challenge because agriculture had already lost its essence during that time, as in they had to really work hard to bring up this sector. So many of them went back to agriculture. The best example of the ruination of the handicraft industry was India, where the Indian artisans involved in the production of silk or producing silk had now become unemployed. Many of them had now lost their job and they were looking out for better jobs. Even in India, a large number of Indians were sent to different parts of the world to work on the property of the European masters. Thus, it is rightly said that industrialization took place at the cost of the colonies. Now we come to the last part of the lesson, environmental problems. Now due to the growth of industries, factories, a lot of environmental problems took place. Alright, there were problems in every city, in every town. People were finding it difficult with the rising factories and industries. More so it took place in the cities because from the towns the industries were now centered in the cities. From the villages they were now brought to the cities. So students, you have seen Industrial Revolution brought about a lot of changes in the political, social, economic and cultural life of those countries where it had taken place. It laid the foundations of the modern society. So I suppose this chapter is well explained. All of you have understood the different points, the sub-points and the different topics that are discussed in this lesson. Now just to brush up with the topic, we had started with what is Industrial Revolution. Now just to take back to what we have already discussed, what is Industrial Revolution? Now Industrial Revolution is a fundamental change in the way goods were produced from human labor to machine. So as you all know, transformation from small scale industries to large scale industries, production of goods from small scale to large scale. All this resulted in efficiency of goods, better quality of goods, lives of the people changed, became much more comfortable, standard of living changed, and this brought about a lot of change in the field of political, social, economic and cultural life of the people. Then we have also discussed about the factors of Industrial Revolution. So just to brush up, first was the geographical location, which was very feasible for the growth of industries and factories in England. The second was availability of capital. The vast amount of capital in England helped the investors to build more industries, all right, factories, as a result of which the profits doubled and contributed in the industrial development in England. The next one was availability of natural resources, availability of labor, which in turn helped England, as in the amount of people that were required to work in the industries and factories helped England to carry out its work at a much faster pace. The last one was scientific and technological knowledge. So this again contributed a big deal. That is, they were ready to experiment with the different inventions, try out new ones, replace the old ones, again a technological advancement. And finally, we have also seen the different inventions. Just to go a little faster with the different inventions, we have, students, please make sure you refer to your textbook to go more in detail with the different inventions. The safety lamp again, which was invented by Sir Humphrey Davy. This was to ensure that the safety of the miners, especially working in the coal mines. And as I have told you, it gave the warning to the miners if whenever the carbon dioxide would increase, this would pose a threat, a danger to the lives of the miners. And then of course, we have also discussed about transport and communication, which came as a great blessing. We have discussed about roadways, waterways, all right, which helped the traders to connect from one part of the world to the other, from a city to a town and even to the remote areas. We have also discussed about the agricultural revolution. In short, it means about the new seeds, chemicals, fertilizers, new machines, new tools, which all contributed in the agricultural revolution. That is, the quality and quantity of goods was now much better. Then we come to the effects of the industrial revolution. Also, we have discussed the impact on England, that is, impact of industrialization on British India. Here we have preferably discussed about the industries, how England took all the profits at the cost of the Indians. The Indians produced the goods, sold them to the Britishers. They bought these goods for a very low price and sold it in their market at a very exorbitant, a high price. All right. So this was the impact of industrialization on British India. And finally, the effects. Here we have discussed the positive effects and the negative effect. Now the positive effects, in short, we have discussed about the scientific revolution, the cultivation that took place on a bigger scale, yeah, the quality and quantity of food grains which also increased, the standard of the people, lives became much more comfortable, everything changed, and the burden of manual work was no longer faced by the laborers. The number of hours that they put in, all right, from 14 hours, 16 hours, comparatively now it was reduced. Why? All this was because of the machine. So these were the positive effects. Negative effects, you have seen how the laborers were made to work. The children suffered a big deal. Little children were made to work with big machines. Their little hands were believed to handle the machines much better compared to big hands, as a result of which many of them died. They were caught in the machines. So they led a very, very miserable life. The type of work that they had to put in, number of hours that they worked for, and after all this, the wages that they were paid was considerably very less. And students, finally the last part, colonization of of Asia and Africa, which we have already discussed just a while ago. It was about how the colonies in Asia and Africa, the people who lived in the colonies, they were made to suffer by the British, made them work as slaves, treated them like slaves, all right, and sent them to different parts of Europe to work in their places, in their countries. So industrialization, no doubt, was a blessing, but at the same time it had some adverse effects. So students, I suppose the lesson is clear to you and the concepts are well explained. please make sure that you read the lesson to have a better understanding. Thank you. Have a good day.